Now we're going to have a last session now from now on, and you might have many experiences to join this kind of a conference, I guess. So you must be tired because you have been here since the early morning, right? So I strongly encourage to ease your tiredness. So strongly encourage you to raise your both hands to the air and clap. All right, that's the clapping for our next speakers. Please step up to the stage, Brian. Please welcome the Brian, the Florida Panthers Director of Hockey Analytics, our last speaker, Brian Macdonald.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to this, and for all of you for being here to hear me speak. So we're going to, let me go back to the title page here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we use data analysis in the Florida Panthers organization. So I think the talk will be a little bit of a different focus than the previous three talks, in that we're going to focus on data analysis and not too much as far as technology, which is maybe a little more general. So we're going to be a little more specific in this talk. And in fact, the first thing that we're going to talk about is one specific example of a project that we worked on with the Florida Panthers that involves data analysis. And it involves using both hockey and business data. And then we're going to give an overview of other ways that we have used data in the organization. And maybe I'll just give a bit of a background about the Florida Panthers. So the Florida Panthers Hockey Club is part of the National Hockey League, the NHL, which is the main pro sports, the main pro hockey league in North America. There's for most of the past several years, there's been 30 teams in the league. Just this year, we added one more team in Las Vegas, so there's now 31 teams. And we're one of the two teams that are located in Florida, which is, we're maybe 40 miles away from Miami, Florida. That's the biggest, the nearest big city to us. So just a little bit of a background for those of you who may not know a whole lot about our organization. And so let's get into this example. So here's an example that can apply to any sport, not just hockey. And so in this example, we are, so the goal of this project was to develop a statistical model for predicting attendance for our home games using only information that is known before tickets go on sale. So that's sort of an important point. So we only want to use information known before tickets go on sale. And the reason for that is that we had a specific application in mind for this. So the application in mind was that we wanted to use this model to help us determine which of our games should be in which tiers in order for the purposes of variable pricing. So by variable pricing, I mean that not all of our home games are going to be equally as interesting to our fans and to the hockey fans in our area. So for example, two of the really popular teams are the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers. Those are two teams in our league that have pretty large fan bases, and especially in the region of South Florida that we are located. So those games tend to be much more popular than other games, and so for that reason, we start with higher prices for those games than we do for other games for a typical game. So what we're trying to talk about here is, well, how do we determine ahead of time, before tickets go on sale, how popular these games are going to be? All right. So so one thing that I just mentioned was, the opponent, the team that we're playing, might have an impact on how popular a game is going to be. And we'll talk about other things that would impact that. Another reason we wanted to use this model, another reason we wanted to build the statistical model is to determine the kinds of things that we might want to request when the league is developing a schedule. So we don't get to determine our schedule. The league determines the schedule for all 31 teams. But we can make certain requests. And so what kinds of things do we want to request? So for example, one specific question that our leadership, our organization's leadership wanted to know about was, would we prefer a good team on a Saturday? And Saturday is typically the most popular day to watch a hockey game. Would we prefer a good team on a Saturday and a bad team during the week on a Monday or Tuesday when it's not as popular to go watch a hockey game? Or would we rather a good team during the week and a bad team on a Saturday? In other words, do we want to focus all our attention on Saturday games and try to make them as good as possible? Or do we kind of want to spread the wealth throughout the week? And so that's one of the things that we wanted to try to answer with this model. And so we just wanted to build a model that included all the possible predictors that we could think of, the variables that might impact attendance, and take all of those things into account and try to model how they actually do, in fact, impact attendance. And so one of the first things that we did was we just built a visualization of some of this data. And so this data that we're going to visualize is just attendance by game from the 2007-08 season to the 2016-17 season for all 30 teams that were around during those seasons. There's 31 teams now, but that's starting in the 2017-18 season, which hasn't finished yet, so we're not including that season in our model. And so we're taking attendance by game from those seasons, and I should just point out that it's announced attendance. So a lot of teams and leagues might compute their attendance numbers differently. So I don't know what it would be in like the Australian Football League or anything like that. I think in most of the North American leagues, it's not necessarily number of people in the building. It's the number of tickets that were sold for that game, whether or not they show up to the game. It's the number of comp tickets given out for free for that game to different companies or charities or what have you. And that's whether or not they actually show up to the game. And so it's usually a combination of those two things. So that's what we mean when we talk about attendance. And so we built this visualization, and it's this huge mess here. And so before tackling this entire visualization, let's just look at the lower right-hand corner here, just these 4 teams in the lower right-hand corner, and zoom into the lower right-hand corner and just talk about this for a little bit. So what we have here is along the horizontal axis, along this axis is date. And so this is just showing the years here. So this mark right here would be January 1st, 2008. The vertical axis is attendance. So we have attendance along the side. And then each dot represents a game. And it's showing the date of that game and the attendance for that game. So for example, this game right here was a little bit before January 1st, 2010. And the attendance was approximately 14,000, I would say, just as an example. And so we've plotted, also each unique figure is for a different team. So this is for all New York Islanders home games. This is all New York Rangers home games. This is all for St. Louis home games and Tampa Bay home games. Okay, so this, so I used to be a college professor, and I like to have very interactive classrooms. So I kind of want to turn this into an interactive classroom right now, if you don't mind. And I want you guys to tell me what you can learn from this visualization just by looking at it. I think it's a fairly simple to understand visualization. It's not too much complicated things going on right here, but I think it can tell us a lot about the data. So what can you tell me, what do you notice about the data? What do you learn about this problem from looking at this data? If anything. You could just shout it out. Okay, could you say it a little bit louder?
We can see maximum, minimum attendance level, and we can also calculate any sort of average value.
Okay, yeah. So we can, just at a quick glance at this, we can kind of get an idea of what the minimum and maximum attendance is for each team, and probably an average value. And it looks like it's different for each team, right? It's pretty different. I mean, the max value here is different from the max value there, for example. And that's just because this is a bigger arena. They play in a bigger arena than the New York Islanders play in. What else do you notice? What else do you notice? What do you notice about the maximum here versus the maximum here? What's that? Okay, so it doesn't look like the attendance fluctuates a whole lot for the New York Rangers, but it does fluctuate a lot for the New York Islanders. And so what's going on here with the New York Rangers? They're a very popular team. They're the most popular team in New York, and they basically sell out every game. So their attendance looks like it's flat for every game. Okay? Anything else that you notice? By the way, it's mostly flat here for the New York Rangers, but then it seems like it dips down and then goes back up a little bit here. Any idea why that might be? This probably, actually, you might not know unless you're a hockey fan or a fan of New York sports, but maybe there's a couple people here from North America that might be able to answer that question. Basically, there was construction at their arena during this year. So a lot of seats were taken away, and then once the construction was done, they went back up in capacity. So anything else you noticed from this data? 2010? For this spot right here? Okay, so any idea what that might be? So that's what we would call, data analysts would call that an outlier. So why is that all the way down here when everything else is kind of flat up here? So this is something that I noticed. This is one of the things that I noticed about the data by plotting it. And so it turns out that, and the reason I found out what it was is I built the model and then got some predictions, and then looked where our predictions did the worst. So I sorted the predictions to determine which ones did the worst in reality, and noticed that two of them that did the worst were both in the New York area on the same day. So then I Googled that date in New York, and it turns out there was a blizzard that day, which it made a bunch of people stay home, or it made them sell far fewer tickets than they would normally sell. So that game right there was there was a major blizzard that year, the day of that game. So that explains that data point. There's another outlier here, which I believe was something similar. It was some sort of weather-related event that caused attendance to be very low. But that's a good question, and that's one thing that we can learn about data by visualizing it, which is you learn about outliers, or you can easily tell which things are outliers. Is there anything else that you notice? Yeah.
네, NHL에 대해서 사실 잘 알지는 못하는데요. 레인저스 같은 경우는 항상 만석인 걸로 봐서는 팬들의 충성도가 굉장히 좀 높은 패턴을 보이는 게 아닌가 생각이 되고, 아일랜드 같은 경우는 상대팀에 대한 전적이라든가 성적 때문에 팬들의 운집도가 경기별로 굉장히 편차를 많이 보이는 게 아닌가라는 생각이 좀 듭니다.
Could you repeat the first part of that question, please?
레인저스 같은 경우는 이제 잘은 모르지만 굉장한 인기팀이라서 항상 만석을 이루는 경우가 많은, 그러니까 팬들의 충성도가 굉장히 높아서 만석을 이루는 경우가 좀 많다라고 생각이 되고, 아일랜드 같은 경우는 팬들의 충성도 같은 경우가 굉장히 낮기 때문에 상대 팀이 누군지 아니면 그때 성적이 어떤지에 따라서 팬들이 경기장에 운집하는 경우가 좀 다르지 않나라는 분석이 좀 되지 않을까라는 생각이 듭니다.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's one of the big reasons in the differences. It's one of the bigger reasons for the differences between the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders is that the New York Rangers, it's a much older team. So it was one of the original 6 teams, the first 6 teams that formed the league about 100 years ago. And the Islanders is they're a newer team. So the fan base for the New York Rangers is much bigger than the fan base for the Islanders. And it probably also has to do with location. So the New York Rangers play in Manhattan, in Madison Square Garden, right in the meat of the city. And the New York Islanders for a long time played on Long Island, which is a little bit farther away from the center of the city. They're now playing in Brooklyn, which is a little bit more centrally located, but for a long time they were kind of out of the city. So I think it does have something to do with fan loyalty, and a couple of those reasons are the New York Rangers is a much older team, and then they're a little bit more centrally located in New York. Okay, anything else that you noticed from this visualization? Yes, over here.
그 2011년에 세인트루이스 같은 경우에는 11년에만 딱 만석이고 나머지는 다 이렇게 요동치고 관객 수가 일정하지 않은데 왜 2011년에만 딱 저렇게 그 시즌에만 만석이 됐는지 궁금합니다.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think during this time period, during this time period, they were an improving team. They made the playoffs year, and I think they started filling their, beefing up their fan base. They were increasing their fan base with continued success year after year. So I think that's part of the reason of the increase in attendance throughout these years right here. And it started going down a little. I don't have a good explanation for why it's gone down here. Because the team is still relatively good. So I don't have a very good explanation, but part of it is as far as this increase here was that the team started getting better and better, and I think that's it's a little more understandable. If we look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, so Tampa Bay Lightning during this time period they were not a very good team. Did not make the playoffs very often, but over time, they started making the playoffs more and more. And these days, past few years, they've been a legitimate championship contender. They made the finals this season, and they're very good. Let's see, they also made the conference finals in this season, so like the semifinals in the National Hockey League during this season. So because of the changes in their team performance, that has affected their attendance. So I think we just identified another variable that we should probably consider if we're building a model, a statistical model to use for predicting attendance. We should probably include something about how good the team is. Anything else that you notice? Sorry?
많아서 그런 거 아닐까요?
아, 예, 그 시즌권 판매량이 다른 그런보다 훨씬 많지 않았을까 생각합니다.
For the St. Louis.
뉴욕 레이전스 팀 같은 경우.
Yes. So I think I believe the New York Rangers, basically their season tickets are they're sold out in season tickets. So they have all their tickets sold for the season, or almost all their tickets sold for the season, just because of full season ticket holders. So I think that's a big part of the reason that their attendance is very flat, or it's the same for every game. They basically are selling out every game from season ticket holders, maybe with very, very few single game tickets. So that could be one reason. All right, I think we'll move on. And here is the same figure, but instead of just the 4 teams that we saw, this is all 30 teams in the league. So I guess, is there anything else that we notice by looking at all 30 teams in the league if we look at this figure? Is there anything else we can observe from this visualization? So in my classes, if my students were quiet, I would just wait as long as I had to for them to speak up and start answering. And maybe our speakers, they think they're off the hook because they're done their talks, but maybe do you guys think they should maybe start answering some of these questions? I think so.
Maybe the Canadians are more loyal to the teams. I see the Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver has the quite steady audience, spectators.
Yes, yeah. So you can definitely see a trend with the Canadian teams. So there's Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Edmonton. Did I miss one? Ottawa. Ottawa, maybe not so much, but the other Canadian teams, they're all sellouts, and that part of that is probably because hockey is more popular in Canada than it is in the United States. This is a kind of an interesting one. There's a drastic change from these 4 seasons to these 6 seasons. That's because this team was originally in Atlanta, and this season moved to Winnipeg. So huge change in attendance when they were in Atlanta. Once they moved to Winnipeg, constant sellout from day one. So I'll just point out a couple more things, and then I think we're good to go and we can move on. So the thing that we noticed with Tampa Bay, when they started winning more games, their attendance got better and better. I think it's true with a lot of the teams on this chart. So, and you may not know if you're not familiar with the NHL, but during this time, Boston was not very good, and then they became a perennial contender. They were a championship contender for many years. Same thing happened with Chicago. They started winning, and they got more fans. Same thing with LA, Nashville, kind of the same upward trend. So winning certainly seems to impact attendance. The location of the team, whether it's in North America or United States or Canada, seems to impact attendance. And so I think we learned a bunch of things about the data. And so let's talk about what we actually included in our model and what were the results of the model. So we already kind of made these observations. So let's kind of move on to this slide right here. And so here are the variables that we included in the model. So we included who the home team was and who the away team was, because we noticed that the location of the arena, whether it's in Montreal or New York or Ottawa, has an impact on how many fans that team has. And also the away team, we would expect to have an impact on how many fans that you get for a game. When the Montreal Canadiens or the New York Rangers come into town, that's probably a more popular game. Day of the week, we kind of mentioned. Saturday games are more popular than Tuesday games, so we would include day of the week in our model. Month of the year in our model, typically towards the beginning of the season, fans aren't as interested, but towards the end of the season, when the playoffs are getting closer, there's much more interest in those games. And holidays, we wanted to check different holidays, Thanksgiving, and also the week between Christmas and New Year is a big week for us in South Florida because there's a lot of people who will come down and go on vacation in our area, especially those who live in the northern part, either in Canada or the northern part of the United States. They'll come down during those winter holiday weeks, and so there's a much greater population in our area during that time, and specifically a greater population of hockey fans during that time. So we wanted to check out the effects of holiday and include that in our model. So we included also in our model whether the two teams were in the same division, and they were, just try to attempt to account for, if the team is a rival or not. And if they're in the same conference, their points during the previous year. So how good the team was during the previous year, how good the team was during the current year. So this is kind of a way to quantify team performance. And a few other things that I think we'll skip for now. And so we built a model that basically finds the impact that each of these variables has on attendance. And the key point is that it finds the impact of these variables independent of all other variables that we considered in the model. So in other words, we find the effect of day of the week controlling for all other variables in the model, which is kind of an important point because if teams were to schedule a bunch of big opponents on the weekend all the time, then the effect of a weekend game might be overstated because of that. High attendance on a weekend game could be because it's a Saturday, but it could also be because there's really good opponents on those days. So we kind of wanted to separate the effects of those things in our model. And so let's get to some of the results. And so here are the results for day of the week. And what we have here is, this is attendance along the bottom, and day of the week from Monday through Sunday along the side here. And this middle line right here is no change in attendance. And so the rectangles on this side would say there's a negative change in attendance, and these right here indicate positive change in attendance. So what this is saying is having a game on a Monday, on average, all other things being equal, it means that we have around 690 fewer fans at a game than at an average game, average game not on a Monday. And whereas if we have a game on a Saturday, all other things being equal, we'll have about 1,000 more fans at one of those games than we would at an average game. And so this is kind of fits what we would sort of expect based on our just experience, which is that weekday games are less popular than weekend games. So Friday and Saturday are the two most popular days to have a game. And so that kind of fits what we already thought, but now we have a way to quantify how much better is a weekend game. And so here are the results for a month. And so this is, I don't know if it's hard to see in the back, but this is October through April, which is the basic, this is the NHL regular season, lasts from October to April. And so we see, much lower attendance early in the season and much higher attendance later in the season as we get closer to the playoffs. And it's basically increasing throughout the season pretty nicely there. So sort of what we expected, but again, now we have an estimate of how much does it matter? How much is the difference between an October game and a March game? This is another interesting one. So this is how much of an effect does the opponent have on a game? And so some opponents, are very popular, and so they have a positive effect on attendance, and some aren't as popular, have a negative effect on attendance. It's sort of interesting that 6 of the first 7 teams here at the top are the original 6 teams in the NHL. So they're the ones with the largest fan bases. So it makes sense that they're at the top of this list because they've been around for the longest amount of time. So that's sort of interesting. And then another interesting one is the effect that holidays has on attendance. So the one that we were very interested in was games between Christmas and New Year's. So we have the league as a whole has many more fans on these games that are between Christmas and New Year's. Probably because people aren't working or people are home for the holidays and they want to go see their team that they haven't been able to see for a year or something like that. So these holidays have a huge impact on attendance, and so do some of the other holidays here. Most holidays actually have a positive impact on attendance. The only ones that have negative impact attendance are Easter and Halloween in the United States, where people usually have other family traditions that they're doing on those days, so they're not as interested in going to sporting events on those days. So it sort of makes sense that those are less popular games to go to a game. And so let's sort of skip through a few of these. So we built that model using. Let's back up one here. So we built a model using those variables, and we just wanted to show a slide here that just gives you an idea of how good the results of that model were. So what this is showing is along the bottom here is our predicted attendance, and along the top here is actual attendance. I'm sorry, this is actually revenue. This is revenue. These are fake numbers because we can't show our real revenue numbers. But so this is projected revenue and actual revenue. And we for the projected revenue, we use the model that we just talked about building. So what this is showing is that there's a pretty good correlation between our predicted numbers and the actual numbers. So we've done a fairly decent job, especially considering that the only data that we've used is data that was available before tickets go on sale. And so once tickets go on sale, we can start using that information. And in fact, you can get a lot of information about how popular a game is by just looking at the tickets that are sold 60 days before a game. So what we've shown here is, in the red, we've shown the number of tickets that were sold for each of these games as of 60 days before the game was supposed to have taken place. All right, so this first one is for a game against Montreal. It looks like there's about 5,000 tickets sold for this game 60 days before the game. So 2 months before the game, there was already 5,000 single game tickets sold for this game. And so I've sorted these games in order, so in order of the number of tickets that were sold 60 days before the game. And so it's ordered by the red. And so the blue, if we look at this, the whole length of the rectangle, this is how many total tickets there were sold by the time the game happened. So basically what we see is the order that we have here, the order of popularity of the games, if you look at the number of tickets that were sold 60 days before the game, it sort of matches fairly well the final number of tickets that were sold. So we have like a downward trend here. We also have a downward trend for the final tickets sold. So what this is saying is that the games where there were a lot of tickets sold 60 days left before the game, they ended up being the most popular games for the most part. They ended up being the games for which there were the most tickets sold by the time the game happened. There's a few exceptions here. This is one of the exceptions. This had very low attendance relative to how many tickets were sold 60 days out. But there's kind of a reason for this that kind of makes sense. And this is Montreal, and they had their goalie, their best player, who was a goalie, got hurt in the middle of the season, and the team was not very good for the second half of the season. So this game, which was supposed to happen right at the end of the season, wasn't very popular because the team hadn't been doing well. And also we had very high ticket prices for that game, so higher than they probably should have been. So that kind of made the number of tickets sold for that game be very low. And this is another big outlier. You know, if you look at tickets sold 60 days before the game, there's very few of them. But we ended up having a lot of tickets sold for that game, and that's because we had a very successful promotion 10 days before the game where there's a special price for tickets, and we had about 4,000 tickets that were sold in one day because of this promotion. So those are two things that doesn't fit the overall trend, but there's really good reasons for those things. But the point of this is you get more information about how popular a game is going to be if you start using tickets, the number of tickets sold, even just 60 days before a game, which is sort of a long time. It's 2 months before a game, and you can already get an idea of how popular the game is going to be. And so you can use both of these pieces of information to kind of determine where to set your prices. So this is sort of like a price optimization problem would be the application of this. And so a lot of the things that we have worked on so far have been related to trying to come up with the best prices to set each of these games at. And so these are two pieces of information that we use to do this. And so so that's kind of one specific project, and now I'm going to do an overview of a few more projects that we've worked on, and a lot of them are very visual, so I won't ask you to give any more observations of any of the visualizations. I'll make all the observations, so you're off the hook there, but just a few more things that, a few more of the problems that we try to sort of solve using data. And so one of them has to do with season ticket holder renewals. So we wanted to come up with a way to predict how likely season ticket holders would be to renew their tickets so that we know what customers are the most at risk as far as not renewing. So maybe these are the customers that our customer service representatives want to spend the most time reaching out to and talking with and giving their time and attention to. So some things that impact how likely a customer is to renew their season tickets, their location. So this is kind of a graph. I mean, these locations might not mean a whole lot to you, but I'll just tell you that these three at the bottom are the three regions that are closest to our arena. And those three regions have the highest renewal rate. So what we have here is this is sort of the region. Across the bottom, we have the renewal rate. In other words, what % of customers renewed their season tickets for the next season. So that's what we mean by renewal rate. And so we have the highest renewal rate for the customers who are closest to the arena, which makes sense. Here's an interesting one. So this is the % of games that each customer attended. So this is saying that if a customer attends a lot of their games, in other words, if a customer is using their tickets, they're more likely to renew their season tickets. So they have higher renewal rates than those who don't use their tickets a whole lot. So if a customer only used their tickets for 40% of the games, they're only 70% likely to renew their season tickets. So much lower than a customer who used their tickets for all of their games. If they use their tickets for all their games, 95% of those people renewed their season tickets. So the number of games that they attend can tell us how likely they are to renew their season tickets. And another interesting one is, how did the team do in the games that they attended? So this is winning percentage in games attended. And so this is saying that the more games a team won while a customer attended, the more likely that customer is to renew. So if the team did not do very well during games that a customer attended, so this is winning percentage of just 20%. So there's a team that only won 20% of their games when a customer attended. Those customers, only 70% of them actually renewed their season tickets. Whereas up here, 93% of those customers renewed their season tickets. So winning has an effect on whether or not customers will renew their season tickets. This is a similar plot for the average number of goals that there are in a game. And so this is goals for the home team, for our team, and also goals for the other team. So this is kind of saying that high-scoring games are more popular. So the more high-scoring games a customer attends, the more likely they are to renew their season tickets. So people like games where the team wins, games where they're high-scoring, and then this next one is the proportion of one-goal games. So this means that the final result of the game, there was only one goal in the difference between the two teams. So it was a 4-3 game or a 3-2 game. So the difference in the score was only one goal. So these are all the close games. So the more close games that a customer sees the percentage of close games that a customer sees when he attends games has an impact on whether that customer is going to renew their tickets. So the more close games, so if 60% of the games are close games, those customers renew their season tickets 94% of the time. If only 25% of the games that they attend are close games, only 77% of those customers renew their tickets. So customers like close games where their team wins and that are very high scoring. So all those things seem to impact the likelihood of a customer renewing their tickets. And so let's move on to just another thing quickly. And here's just a visualization of some seat data on a map of the arena. And so we kind of use things like this to sort of just try to determine trends, sales trends, what sections are most popular and what areas of the arena are most popular, which ones are least popular. You know, where do we have the most open inventory? So where do we have the most available seats and things like that. So it's just a way to visualize some of our data. We could look at a table of numbers and get the same information, but sometimes it's just much easier to look at it on a picture. So that's kind of what we're doing with these things. And then another interesting visualization that we've done is we've looked at different kinds of data on the map of South Florida. So this region is the region close to our arena that has the most fans, most of our fans. This little logo right here, this is where our arena is. This is sort of just, this is not, like no one lives here. This is sort of just this wildlife that's there, basically. It's a national park. And, but this is where people live. There's a lot of people live. Miami is down here, if you are familiar with Miami. So this is the largest city that's close to us. Fort Lauderdale is another city that's close to us that has a fairly high population. But what we're showing on these maps is some demographic information. In this case, it's we're highlighting the graphs based on ethnicity. So over on the left, we've colored each region by the percentage of white people that are in each region. So Caucasians that are in each region. For the second graph is colored by the number of Hispanic people who are in each region. This is the number of black people who are in each region. So you can kind of get an idea of what South Florida looks like. It looks sort of segregated as far as where people live. There's very distinct areas where the white, Hispanic, and black populations are. And so we kind of, we can use this information as far as targeting our sales and our marketing initiatives for certain groups of people. And then over here we have this is I believe this was population. So this is the number of people that live in each region. Oh no, I'm sorry. This was white, Hispanic, Black, and other. So other could be, in most cases, for us at least, it's European nationalities, people with European origins. So we have a lot of high Russian population down in this area, and we also have lots of people from Scandinavia, so Finland and Sweden, who are big, also big hockey countries also that live in the area. So. So there's a pretty diverse population in South Florida, and this just gives us kind of an idea of where all of these people are located geographically in our region. So, so we can also plot some other information on maps of South Florida. So another interesting one is we used driving time to the arena. So this is driving time to arena. So yellow is much shorter driving time. Blue is very long driving times. So this gives us an idea of how long it takes people that live in each area to drive to the arena. So it's a little bit different than distance from the arena. You might, those of you who live in Seoul probably know that, depending on what part of Seoul you're in and depending on what time of day you're going from one part to another, the driving time could be significantly different, even though the driving distance is the same. So we measured driving distance during evening rush hour, during the work week for our stadium, and then this is just a map that shows age, so it's colored by age, house median income for the people in these areas, and then the average household value to give us an idea of where are the customers that have the most disposable income. So these are just a few of the things that we do on the business side, and maybe just for a couple minutes I'll talk about things that we've done on the hockey side and what kinds of data we've had there. So, and maybe I'll just skip this slide and move right to this. So what we see here is a part of the hockey, a hockey ice, a hockey rink, and down here is the goal. And so what we're plotting here is shot data. So this is data. So the colors here represent the shooting percentage at each location on the ice. So red is much higher shooting percentage. So many more goals will go in. If a shot is taken from this location, it's much more likely that a goal is going to go in than a shot out here from this location. And so, not too surprising, but we kind of get an idea of where people are shooting from and also how likely those shots are to go in the net and be goals. And so this is for the entire league, but not every team looks like the entire league. So this is one specific team, and their heat map sort of looks a little bit different than the map for the whole league. And then we can kind of do the same thing for players as well. So here's one particular player who mostly takes his shots. He's a right-handed player, so he mostly takes his shots from this side of the ice. And it's pretty well, just located in that region of the ice. So some players, have pretty predictable places where they like to take their shots from. Some players do not have very predictable locations that they like to take their shots from. So in this case, this player is sort of all over the place. Takes shots from here, takes shots from in front of the net, takes shots from this side of the ice. So that player is sort of all over the place. So you can get an idea of the tendencies of a player by just looking at where that player takes his shots most often. And so with that, I think that's the last slide on the end of the presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Brian, and please remain on the stage. And I've heard that he has talked about the growth of the sports industry through professional scientific technique with the actual data, mostly consists of visualized data such as graph and maps. And now we also will have a discussion session with the panelists and the moderator. So we'll invite Hyun-duk Kim again to come up to the stage as a moderator. And I'd like to ask Jong-chae Kim, a professor, Philae Dickinson University, NJ Sports Administration, also to come up to the stage. And also, you might be given the questionnaire with other papers at the registration desk in the morning. And to help us to fulfill your needs later on, please fill out the questionnaire and please hand the paper to our staff or at the registration desk. 네, 받으셨던 이 설문지는 나가실 때 추후 여러분들의 다음 컨퍼런스를 위해서 도움을 드리기 위해 작성하셔서 제출을 해주시면 대단히 감사하겠습니다. Now, think we are ready. Please have a seat.
Okay, we are about to start. In the previous session, at the starting moment of the previous session, I was telling everyone about raising more questions, but let me apologize first because I didn't give you enough time to raise questions. So, in this final session, I know how to read the clock, how many minutes we have, and I'll give you more room to ask more questions to the Mr. Bryan and Macdonald. Okay, and Mr. Bryan gave us introduced new ways of estimating the attendance, and it was I'm really excited and amazed about the ways he developed. Should I say developed or validated? And I'd like to start with this question. What is your background to do all that fancy things?
So
Hello?
Okay. So my background was actually originally in mathematics. That's what I did my graduate degree in. I went to undergraduate college for electrical engineering, and went to grad school for mathematics. Then after I graduated grad school, I was a college professor for 6 years at United States Military Academy at West Point. It might look like I was in the military because of my hair, but I actually, it's unrelated to, I was actually a civilian professor there. So, but during my time there, I started learning about data analysis and statistics from some of the other professors there, and also just learning on my own a little bit. And that's when I started studying hockey data during that time as well. So that's sort of the background. And how I sort of got started in the field.
Thank you. Also, the reason I asked you about his background is when I was preparing this conference, I looked over all his materials, presentation materials, and I was wondering, who is this guy? Is this guy from a sports world? And then looked at a CV. He's from the mathematics. So now he's in sports world with us. So attendance is everything. So our panel member, Professor Kim Jong-chae, is going to discuss more about that issue.
네, 안녕하십니까, 김종채라고 합니다. You did a nice job. Everybody knows about this topic. This is one of the hottest topic, I guess, in sports. And also, I'm not sure how many of audience, or including us, are fans of hockey. I believe not, because hockey is not really popular in South Korea. So it was good. That's why it was good to know more about these sports. So I still, your presentation reminded me to think about our conference theme, right? So technology can help develop the new sports, new industry. So maybe it's a good chance for us to think about bringing these sports and find out the best way how to make more popularity your sports in South Korea. And also it was very entertained since you show us real result and then the maps. So I think that's why I think audience has more attention on your presentation. Another part I want to mention about your created model, especially to predict attendance. I think this is very important. I know some of the audience are from sports league, right, professional league. I'm not sure how those leagues predict attendance, but this model might be useful. And another thing, this model could be, as you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation, it can apply to any sports, right? So
Yep.
I like that, like practical application. We saw many business data, sports data, right? I think it's good time to ask you, can you just define the difference between business data and sports data you work with?
Yeah, I guess when I use those words, for sports data, I mean data that's related to either the team or the players, or things that happen within the game. Business data, I would say, is things that's data that might be related to ticket sales or marketing or finance or things like that. You could also just consider them all business data. Because they all relate to the business on the ice. One of the best way to improve ticket prices is probably not by building a fancy attendance model. It's probably by winning games. So that in that sense, the team data, the sports data is business data as well, because that's the best way to impact your revenue is to win games. So you could kind of think of both of them as business data, but typically when people talk about sports data versus business data, that's what they mean.
Can I say your team is kind of small market team?
Definitely a small market team. It is one of the newer teams in the league. I think it's only been around since 1993, I believe was the first year. And so, and it's also in a non-traditional hockey market. So we're South Florida, which is by far the southernmost team in the league, by far the hottest weather in the league. So,
A lot of snowbirds.
yeah, but we do have a lot of snowbirds. So we have a lot of people who come down who are retired or for other reasons come down to Florida in the winter and stay up in the northeastern part of the United States in the summer, but come down to Florida in the winter. So we have some hockey fans because of that. But we're slowly building sort of interest in hockey in our area. Through the team being there, and then also through youth hockey initiatives. Where the organization teaches hockey to kids in the area, basically, to try to generate interest in the game and provide them with something to do, another activity to do, a cool activity that they can do in Florida, as opposed to a lot of the other sports that they play.
Let me ask one more question, and I'll return to Dr. Kim. You talk about tickets. As far as I know, tickets are various: group tickets, luxury tickets, season tickets, or just free ticket. I don't know you have free ticket, but college usually have free ticket. So based on your model you created, so can you say you can create a different marketing strategy to your sales team? Because that's what you found, and they may use your model and predict each game and how they're gonna sell different types of tickets.
Yeah, I think that does impact a little bit what they do, as far as what they focus on the games that they focus on, and they're going to know certain games. if they have a really high projected attendance or projected revenue, those are going to be the more popular games than the other ones. So it definitely, impacts some of their strategy. I wouldn't say we haven't used that. I don't know that we've used it a whole lot yet to impact marketing strategies, but that's something that we're going to start doing this year, and that's something that we're going to be involved in from the group of data analysts that I work with. As far as, we looked at those maps of South Florida, and so you might imagine that depending on, for example, their household income, maybe for the regions where household income is high, maybe those are the folks that we tried to market our premium tickets to. For example, our all-inclusive clubs to, people, if they're in that region, maybe they're more likely to be interested in those tickets. Or maybe not. I mean, that could be totally wrong, but it's the kind of question that we can try to answer using data is, should we be targeting those people more often for the premium tickets than we target other people for the premium tickets? So things like that, I think that data will be useful. We don't know yet, but I think we're pretty optimistic that data will be useful in helping us determine our marketing strategy for either specific games or even just our marketing strategy in general for just our overall marketing strategy for the organization.
One thing I remember now is the Christmas week. You sold more ticket than Thanksgiving weeks, right? Yeah. That was interesting to me.
Yeah, and there's a large population, especially from Montreal area, Quebec, the Quebec province in Canada, that will come down to Florida during their winter holiday break. And so, in fact, I didn't mention it during the talk, but our most popular game every year, the thing that we request from the league is we always request that we have Montreal between Christmas and New Year's. And it's always our most popular game of the year, every year. So, so that's, there's certainly a difference, and specifically for people from Montreal, there's certainly a difference in what our population in South Florida looks like during those winter, the winter holiday weeks.
Thank you. And as we talked about, in terms of the domain of sport marketing, attendance is everything, because attendance is related to the parking, concession sales, and everything. So I'd like to, before we want to move on to the other question, I'd like to tell. So we talked about the hot weather in Florida, South Florida, but biggest distributor of snowboard are located in Florida, Miami.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I'm from the same city, South Florida, and I have a list of questions from the audiences here. So instead of we just tossing out our questions to each other, let's focus on move on to their questions. Our participant. I have seen, as a faculty member in sport marketing in the sports industry, I have seen rapidly increasing interest in data analysis and a relevant job in this area. So many audiences ask that how to become a data analyst. Is there any standard or officially structured programs to learn, go through? If you have any information, please share that.
Until recently, there weren't very many programs dedicated to just data analysis or data science, and especially sports data science. But there's more and more colleges and universities in the United States that have specific data science programs. So it's becoming more and more popular in general. And if for those who might want to become data analysts, that'd be a great thing to sort of start studying. So there's undergraduate degrees in data science. And I believe there's some master's programs now in data science as well. But there's a lot of different paths that you can take to become a data analyst. I know people who have backgrounds in computer science. I know one of the analysts in the NHL working for another team, like sort of my counterpart for another team, he has a PhD in chemistry, but he just happened to be very interested in data and hockey data in particular. And so, I know another gentleman who was sort of, he was a professional poker player for a while and sort of developed his skills in probability and statistics from playing poker. So I think there's a lot of different paths that you can take. I think the one thing that most people had in common was they were publishing their work in hockey online for everyone to see. So they would, no one did an attendance model because they were focused on sports data, but things like this attendance model, they would write articles on their own blog or on other websites describing what they've done, describing their methods, and sort of the results and how those results could help a team win more games. So I think that's the number one thing that most people had in common is that they started doing things online, tweeting about it constantly and just trying to get their work out there for everyone to see. And people eventually notice those kinds of things. And the people who work for teams like me, that we pay attention to what's going on online. We get ideas from that, and we also get a feel for who are the up-and-coming analysts basically in the field. So, yeah, I mean that's the number one thing. I think just start working on some interesting problem, some problem that you want to be able to answer using data that you think no one else has answered yet. So something that's interesting to you, so that you enjoy doing it. Work really hard at it, and then when you're done, do a little bit of self-promotion, even though that might be a little uncomfortable at times. You kind of have to get the word out there about what you're doing.
Thank you. And I believe this is the 100th year, NHL's birthday, birthday year, right? We are celebrating 100 years of NHL history. And one more question. This is from myself. Can you tell us about, so in order to have a more senses about the league and your team, about your team, how, can you tell us about more annual budget size, magnitude of the annual budget? If it needs to be confidential, you shouldn't have to share, and the organizational structures.
Yeah, so I think I probably can't share that specific information, but what I will say is that, there's definitely, you might be able to tell who the teams are from the attendance visualization, but there's definitely teams who have much higher budgets than us, and so they're the amount of money that organizations are able to spend on employees varies a lot. So the NHL, for player salaries, there's a salary cap. So there's a maximum number of salaries that you can, there's a maximum amount of salaries that you can pay all of the players. So in that sense, that sort of levels the playing field a little bit. But in other areas of the organization, there's typically no limit on how much money a team can invest in that area of the organization. So for example, coaching and management, there's no cap, there's no maximum number of dollars that a team can spend on its coaches or its management. So the teams with extra money will spend their money in those areas if they can't spend it on the player area because they're not allowed to by the league rules. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if I can remember sort of league revenue numbers and league budget numbers, and I'm not sure that I can divulge that information anyway. But it's definitely tricky. I mean, there's trade-offs, and there's with the whole salary cap thing. I think it was very unpopular in the beginning. A lot of people didn't want a salary cap for a variety of reasons, and it was positives and negatives of having it, I guess. But I think for the league as a whole, it's sort of necessary to maintain some sort of competitive balance in the league.
I know most of NFL teams, including your team, has a position like you have, the director of analytics. Do you see the same condition to other sports league?
Yeah, I think I would say in our league there's maybe 15 teams have a data analyst working for them.
Have.
At least on the sports side. I'm not as familiar with the business side, but I imagine there's more teams who have. I believe data is probably used more on the business side of the organization in general, but that's just sort of a guess on my part. As far as other leagues, I would say Major League Baseball is probably has the most analysts, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. It became popular earlier in baseball to use statistics to evaluate players, and also baseball is a different sort of game than hockey. So early on, it probably was easier to analyze or more useful to analyze the game with the data that existed. So, and part of that is because baseball, a lot of it is a one-on-one matchup between a pitcher and a batter. Whereas a game like hockey or basketball or soccer or football, American football, there's several players involved in every play. There's not very many one-on-one matchups, so it's harder to sort of isolate what's going on in those situations. And I think you need more complicated data. You need more detailed data to analyze those games. Whereas, 50 years ago, the data that you had for baseball, you could still use that and to really help your team win. So I think it's part of the reason Major League Baseball has a lot more analysts. And then the NBA also, every team in the NBA has an analyst. So they're a little bit maybe ahead of the NHL in that area, I guess there's different reasons why that might have happened. Also, I think there was more detailed data earlier, so I think that's another part of it was just the availability of good data that can help you make decisions. So,
I'm just curious about your leadership and their expectation. To me, data analytics is important because you could make better decision.
mm-hmm.
So what about their expectation to you? Because you are the director of analytics that team. So.
Yeah, I would say leadership is definitely interested in using data, and it starts at ownership. So our owners, their day jobs are on Wall Street, so they have financial companies and they're involved in electronic trading. So a lot of what they do with that company is they have algorithms, it's all based on data that they use to determine when to buy and sell stocks. So they're very aware of how useful data can be because of that organization, and so it's it starts up there, and then the other leadership in an organization is interested in data. There's certainly different people that are more interested than others in data. So there's sort of a range of how interested people are in data, but it's certainly something that everyone wants to win more games, and on the business side, everyone wants to either cut expenses or make more money. So if there's a way that you can use data to do that, everyone's open to that sort of thing.
Thanks.
Okay. This is the question from one of our audiences, and from your perspective as a sports data analyst, and what among the open sources, what is the most advanced technology for sports data analysis? Is there any available open sources?
Yeah, so I think as far as software, or I think the thing that's most commonly used is the programming language R, which is an open source programming language that's good for data analysis, basically. So most people I know use that. Some people use Python, which is another programming language. And then as far as visualization of data, a lot of people will use Tableau. It's very popular. I don't know if any of the, if that's popular in Korea at all or anywhere in Asia, but in North America, Tableau is very popular in sports and outside of sports for data visualization. So that's not open source, but those would be the three things that I think I've heard people use the most. I use R for almost everything.
So those data graphic representations are from the R.
Yes. Yes.
Estimation from the R. Okay, thank you. And since we only have like less than 7 minutes, let's give them a room to ask questions to you. Okay. 질문 있으신 그 어디언스는 이제 질문 좀 부탁드릴게요. 네, 마이크 좀 부탁드립니다.
Hi, my name is Young Chai, and I'm a student studying kinesiology and sports studies here. So my question was, since sports data is so readily available to the average person nowadays, how do you think this will affect local sports participation for especially students who and younger children who we want to bring into like the sports industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how it will impact how many people will be interested in sports. One of the things that one of the reasons I got into studying sports data when I was a professor was I wanted to use it to get more people interested in data. So kind of the other way around, the reverse of what you were kind of asking about. Because a lot of people don't like their math classes or their statistics classes and things like that, and maybe they don't always see the relevance of what use calculus can be in their daily lives. But if you tie in data with something like sports, something that they're interested in, that makes them more interested in learning about data and how to analyze it. So that's kind of how I try to use data. One of the reasons I started getting into this field was for that purpose. But I imagine one thing that all professional sports organizations would like to do is to grow interest in the game, in their sport. So getting kids interested in hockey in South Florida, for example, it's probably would take a while for it to naturally happen, just because it's such a warm weather climate. But spending a lot of time on that is pretty important for the long term growth of the organization and popularity of the sport in South Florida. And maybe there's some ways we haven't really looked into using data. As far as what are the ways that we can sort of improve the popularity of youth hockey or improve the popularity of hockey amongst children. We haven't really looked into that yet, but it's probably something that would be useful to do at some point. Especially all the small markets, not just us, but all the small markets in the NHL where they might not be traditional hockey markets. One of the keys is building interest in the sport, starting with children at a young age.
Thank you. Any other audience who has a question? As we know, since we have a translators back there, languages shouldn't be a matter. So ask us any questions. Yes, please give him a mic.
Hi, this is Paul from Korean Professional Football League, and I'd like to question you about that. This question might a little bit less related with your own job, but I was wondering about how to approach the potential customers prior to analysis on the data which you just presented on your presentation.
Potential customers, as far as if you're a company trying to sell your product to a customer, or
yes, from your presentation, we could only understand that how your methods, that how you analyze your customers, which is already quite loyal to your products. But however, we'd like to more understand about how you approach or advertise the potential customers, which is not having
okay.
sufficient information, etc.
Okay, so I'll give one specific example of something like that. Our marketing department purchases billboards in the area on some of the major highways in the area, and they kind of came to us and said, we would like to use some sort of data to help us determine where should we put these billboards so that they will reach the most people that we are interested in, and in particular the most people who aren't yet season ticket holders. And so, so one way we tried to do that is we got some traffic data from the government, from the Florida state government, and we got some traffic data from Google Maps that we got ourselves. That's sort of like open source data. And we also used some of the demographic data that we saw in the presentation and sort of combined all those things and determined where the billboards would get most exposure to people who are not yet fans, but who are also close enough to our arena so that they could potentially become fans and become season ticket holders at some point, or at least be interested in coming to a couple games per year. So I think, does that answer your question? Is that kind of what you were asking?
Okay, if I question you one more, I would like to also know about your online advertisement as well, because what you explained just before is like a more like offline advertisement, and we also want to know about like how you approach the customers on online. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's not something that we've got into as a team yet, but as soon as I get home from this conference, our first day back at work will be Monday, and I actually have a meeting scheduled with our head of marketing, and we're going to kind of talk about more ways that we can get involved in the marketing process. And two of the big things is going to be email marketing and digital marketing. So so email me in about a year. I can give you my contact information. Email me in a year, and I'll have a better answer to your question.
Or why don't you tell him about your one of the significant public relation activities, like a Turkey Day or something like? Maybe that's helping your Panthers to expand your market size. So I think he's also asking about what you are actually doing.
Oh, things we're actually doing?
Promotional activities.
So you said like a turkey day, like a turkey drive? Yeah, so for Thanksgiving in the United States, we have a big turkey drive. Another thing that we did recently to sort of, it was in part to help the community, and in part to, make ourselves more visible in the community was we had a pretty big Hurricane Irma, that hit South Florida. A lot of different areas of South Florida. It basically went up, I don't know if you know what the shape of Florida is, but it's very long and narrow. And it's a hurricane that went up directly up the middle of the state, basically, and impacted basically the entire state. So we participated and teamed up with different government organizations and different nonprofit organizations to provide relief to people that were impacted by Hurricane Irma and that are also in our general area. So we kind of played a fairly visible role in that, and in fact, during the hurricane, our arena was sort of a staging area for a lot of equipment and supplies, and for the workers who were electric company workers that were either Florida State Electric Company workers or they came from California or New York. A lot of people flew in to help specifically with the hurricane, and a lot of them stayed at our arena. And so our arena and our organization in general has kind of tried to help out in that area, certainly to help the community, but it's also, I think it's mutually beneficial because it also gets our name out there a little bit more, and you know, we try to build a relationship with the community. Not just provide a product to people, but try to build a relationship with the community that's, you know, long term and is mutually beneficial.
Thank you. I saw it. I saw the really active like public relation activities for the Panthers. And any other questions?
오늘 그 유익한 강연과 토론 잘 듣고 있습니다. 저는 인공지능을 전공을 하고 지금 이제 모바일 개발자로 일을 하고 있는데요. 제가 최근에 보니까 국내에서도 좀 이 빅데이터 관련해 가지고 분석을 하고 이렇게 데이터를 모델링하는 쪽에 대해서 관심이 좀 많아지는 것 같은데, 제가 볼 때는 이 빅데이터 관련된 산업으로 가게 되면은 데이터를 모델링하고 클렌징하는 쪽에 데이터 사이언티스트가 필요하다고 생각이 되는데, 미국에서는 그런 뭐 디지털 마케팅을 하는 데 있어서 데이터 사이언티스트의 역할이 어느 정도 되는지 궁금합니다.
Sorry, I didn't have I think my translator had a dead battery, but if one of you guys could translate part of that question, or I can, or if you can repeat the question.
질문하신 분 잠시 일어나셔 다시 한 번만 짧게 질문 해주시면 감사하겠습니다.
그러니까 요약해서 얘기를 하면은 그 빅데이터 관련된 그 산업이나 이쪽으로 뭔가 디지털 마케팅을 하려면은 데이터를 모델링을 하고 클렌징을 하는 작업들이 필요한데, 제가 알기로는 이런 것들을 데이터 사이언티스트가 한다고 들었는데, 미국에서는 이런 분야에 있어서 데이터 사이언티스트가 어느 정도 역할을 하는지에 대해서 답변을 듣고 싶습니다.
Okay, so the question was about sort of data management and data cleaning, and what are the different roles of a data scientist, and how much time do they focus on each aspect of the data analysis process? And I would say, I mean, I think this is common in most industries. I would say the majority of my time is spent on cleaning and managing data, either collecting, cleaning, and managing data. So it's time consuming. It's probably the least fun part about the job too, unfortunately, but it's also the thing that, you know, that you have to have clean data in order to analyze it. So a data scientist like myself is very involved in the cleaning of the data, and I would say it's like the biggest bottleneck in what we can do. So one of the things that I've suggested to our organization was for us to hire more programmers or folks who are sort of database administrators who are able to clean and manage data and generate reports and things like that. Just because, you know, I think I've seen estimates 80% of the data analysis process is spent on getting and cleaning and managing data, and not necessarily analyzing data. So it's something that, you know, someone like me is involved in the entire process, but we also try to, you know, hire additional folks to help us in those areas that are the most time consuming. And so I would say data cleaning and management is the most time consuming part of the process, and where we've tried to hire some help.
So you compile and analyze and make it work by yourself, all by yourself?
Well, I mean, not totally by myself. Well, for certain projects, it would be all by myself. But certain other projects, and also more recently, since we have hired some more people to help, there are different people who will do different parts of the process. So some will be in charge of, you know, just getting and cleaning data. Some will be in charge of generating reports. Some will be in charge of analyzing data. But when I started, basically I was the only person on the business side, and we did not have any really reliable data, even for like ticket sales data. It wasn't that clean, and it wasn't that easy to understand. So a lot of a lot of my first year or two in the organization was basically building a database and managing data. And now we're at the point where that's sort of our sort of ticket sales data is pretty good, and we're starting to spend more time on analysis of that data. But we still have data from other areas of the organization: marketing data, digital marketing data, email marketing data, concessions data, merchandise data, and things like that. And we have some of our new hires are helping with that. We also hired an external company to help us build a database and kind of sort of bring all of those data sources together in one centralized location to make it easier to analyze.
Thank you. I think, yes. Can you hand over the mic?
Hi, my name is Daewon Kim. I'm a student. Sorry, I'm not a hockey fan, but I just want to
That's okay.
I just want to extend the talk to another type of sport, which is soccer. I don't know if this is just happening here in Korea, but perhaps in other countries. The soccer fans here do not have much interest in the National League as they do in the European leagues. So going back to the main theme of the conference, do you think sports technology, such as your attendance model, can have an impact on people to be more engaged in the National Soccer League, or any other marketing schemes to improve the attendance? Or lastly, do you think this issue arises from the difference in the level of the intensity of the play, meaning that people just prefer watching competitive matches where world-class players from Europe are playing at? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can come up with a good answer for that question. A lot of the things that I think about are problems that a team would have, not problems, but like sort of things that a team would like to solve. In other words, I'm looking at things from a team's perspective. I think the question that you're asking is more something like a problem that a league would try to solve. So I know that the NHL, I can't speak for any of the soccer leagues, but I know the NHL, the league office has analysts that work. They have some analysts that help work with the teams. They help the teams out with their data analysis. They also have analysts that try to help the league make decisions for itself, and in particular, there's a marketing department for the league. So each team has a marketing department, but there's also a marketing department for the league, and they would be the ones that would work on problems like that. There's also data analysts that are doing data analysis problems for the league as opposed to for teams. And so that's the kind of project that they would work on. So I'm not really sure if there's anything that they try to do as far as using data to sort of help the popularity of, in your case, I guess you were talking about the Korean soccer leagues versus the European soccer leagues. For the NHL, it's sort of different because the NHL is probably considered the premier league in the world for hockey. So they're probably thinking about different types of problems, problems that are different than the problem that you kind of described. So I don't know if I have a real good answer for that, but there are probably ways that you can use marketing, smart marketing, digital marketing, email marketing to improve the popularity of the game here in Korea, or at least the league here in Korea.
Wishes answered your question. And since your time is running out, and let us have one last question. Yes.
Thank you. Looking at the data that you just showed about the attendance, it seems like sometimes you have more, you depend more on away fans than the home fans. So did you have to like at one point tell the marketers that you have to maybe openly or secretly promote to the away fans? Because over here in Korea, it's not a big country, so if you go to a stadium, there's always more, sometimes you see more away fans than home fans.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we see. You know, I gave the example for the Montreal Canadiens game between Christmas and New Year's. There'll be a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans in that game, and I think in the past, you know, we've had different strategies. There was one year where, you know, we made it a priority to have more fans, more home fans in our arena for those games. In other years, we haven't made that a priority, so we've had a lot of away fans, and in some cases we have specifically targeted away fans, and I don't know if it was secretly or openly. I guess it's openly now since I just talked about it on, and this is being recorded on video, but it's definitely something that we've talked about and sort of debated internally. And I know other organizations have debated this internally. Other small market teams have struggled with the decision. You know, what do we value? Do we just want to get the most people in the building that we can, or do we want to make the experience for our home fans or season ticket holders as best as possible? So some teams have, you know, done things like, I don't know if they've specifically stopped marketing to away fans or anything like that, but they have specifically made it more difficult to buy tickets online if you live in certain regions of the country. So, and that especially happens in playoff games, or the NHL, like the finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, where you know, certain teams would restrict access to buying their tickets online based on zip code. So you would have to be, you know, if we were to do it, we haven't done this as far as I know, but if we were to do it, we would restrict access to only people who live in the South Florida area. And anyone outside that area, maybe they can't go online and buy tickets directly from us. They can probably still buy from the secondary market, but we won't, you know, if we were to do it, we wouldn't sell to anyone in, say, Chicago, if we were playing Chicago. So it's definitely something that we've talked about. What do we do? I know other teams have had that internal debate, and I don't know that there's any right answer. It's just kind of comes down to the organizational philosophy and where each team is at a given moment in time.
Thank you. No more questions to be accepted because we gotta go. And I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all the respected guest speakers from all around the world and the organizers, especially also for all the audiences here who are like having us here. So tomorrow is the starting of the holiday season. So happy holiday, and let's give him one round of the big applause. Thank you.
Seems like he's giving us a closing remarks. So it's very interesting that we can get the insights from the analyzed data, which stands for some significant meaning. So before we finish today's conference, let us have a memorable time to take a group photo session. So our speakers, distinguished guests, and the moderator and panelists, please come up to the stage one more time. May I ask you to come up to the stage for the group photo? Okay, please take a pose. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. And please remain on the stage because our Miss Young-ho Park, prepares some special gifts for you guys for taking your time, for being here with us today. So this is kind of a special present, so you can open the present in your room. Thank you very much for attending this conference. It's been quite long from the early morning till now. She's delivering her deepest appreciation to all the attendees, including speakers and moderators and panelists. Okay, please give them a big round of applause once again. Thank you very much. You may step down from the stage. Now you may step down from the stage. Thank you very much. All right, this brings us to the end of this year's 2017 Sports Industry Global Conference. To help us better understand our participants' needs, we ask that you fill out the enclosed questionnaire and hand it into the registration desk. And at last, Sports Industry Conference took 7 times of a meeting over the last 7 months. Once again, thank you for your participation. I hope all of you could share your knowledge and experience through this conference. Thank you very much and take care on your way back. Thank you.